Good morning. This is Father Stephen Kelly from St. John's Church in Detroit. And we're continuing our series of daily morning meditations where we generally look at one or another of the lessons that are assigned for morning or evening prayer, what is known as the daily office lectionary. But we're actually going to deviate from that today. We're going to do something a little bit different. But I just wanted to point out to you that over my shoulder here is the first rector of St. John's. His name was William Armitage. He was serving at the church in I believe Vermont or New Hampshire. But either way, he was elected rector here as a young man, came and was rector here for 7 years, and then was elected the second bishop of Wisconsin, now the Diocese of Milwaukee. He followed the prayer book saint Jackson Kemper as diocesan bishop in Wisconsin, and was only a bishop for 7 years before he died. He was quite young when he passed away, and he is buried here at Elmwood Cemetery with his wife and 3 of his children, who all died in infancy. His one child who lived to adulthood is buried in Connecticut, a daughter. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring up Father Armitage. But speaking of people, instead of doing a reading today for the morning or evening prayer, I thought what we would do is take a look at the saint of the day, because it's a controversial one. In fact, he's not on the American calendar. But he is a vital part of the calendar of the Church of England. And the person I am talking about is King Charles I. Now, you're saying to yourself, wait a second, there's an English king who's considered a saint? Absolutely. And it's because of the importance of the Church of England being a part of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Now, some of you have seen the movies, and you've seen the movies that portray Charles I as the bad guy, and that's because he was actually a person who really and fully believed that in the Catholicity of the Church of England, and of course by extension our Episcopal Church. What does that mean? Well, at the Reformation, one of the things that the Church of England did not do was throw out Catholic sacraments and Catholic ministry, right? We have bishops, priests, and deacons. We have all the valid sacraments. And we have liturgical worship, which both expresses the fullness of the biblical faith that we proclaim, as well as preserves it from error and personal deviance by individuals. There were people in England, however, that felt that the Reformation did not go far enough. And those folks, the dissenters from the religion, here in America, we make a big deal out of them because, well, we call them the Pilgrims, right? The Puritans. They were the people who were dissenting from the fullness of the faith as the church in England had received it. And so Charles himself really enforced very strictly, and especially with the help of his Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, who's also accounted as a martyr in our calendar. Ironically, he's in the Episcopal Church calendar, but Charles is not. But Charles fought for the divine right of kings, which of course were very anti-American, and a part of whence the Parliament, the Protestants, decided to try to overrule the work of the church by taking over Parliament. He actually dissolved Parliament for a period of time. And again, Americans hate the idea of that as people who love our Republican democracy, our democratic Republican form of government, where we have representatives that we've elected. It rubs Americans the wrong way. But when it comes to the faith and the importance of the faith, it is because of Charles that the Church of England is not Presbyterian. And so that is important for the Church in England to remain a part of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. And so Charles was eventually arrested by the government, by the people of Parliament, and after they had put William Laud to death, they then put Charles to death. So anyway, he was born in the year 1600, so you get an idea of the time frame. And I thought I'd read to you from the Anglican Breviary his martyrdom. From the time of his arrest, he spent most of his time in prayer and contemplation. On the way to his execution, he gladly made use of the preparation for death with the aid of one of the chaplains allowed to him, with whom he recited the office of the day and then listened with great devotion to the reading of the Passion according to St. Matthew. Thereafter, he received the last sacraments, by which fortified he went bravely and cheerily to his death. Edward High, the Earl of Clarendon, who knew him well, wrote of him on this wise: he was, if ever any, that most worthy of the title of an honest man. So great a lover of justice was he that no temptation could dispose him to a wrongful action except it was so disguised to him that he believed it just. He was the worthiest gentleman, the best master, the best husbandman, the best father, and the best Christian that age in which he lived produced. Others have testified that he was marked by a virtue of purity and by a practice of prayer that shone wonderfully amidst the temptations and distractions to which he was exposed. He was well known for his strict sobriety in food and clothes, and he ever showed a noble insensibility to flattery. All who knew him were impressed with a certain innocence in him, and even his bitter enemies said of him, "He is God's silly vassal." At his execution, he affirmed that he was a faithful member of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which same took place on January 30th, 1649. Afterwards, his body was laid in St. George's Chapel, Windsor, but at the command of his enemies, he was buried without the rites of the Church. And for their hatred of him and of the priesthood was not satisfied even when they had accomplished his destruction. And he was venerated because he gave his life for the things which men of such minds are unable to perceive. So you're saying to yourself, wait a second, he died. How did he preserve the Catholic faith? Well, we know the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. That's an important thing for us to remember. And what the people in England discovered, that was the only thing worse than having a king, was having a severely Protestant government tried to rule over them. And that was eventually overthrown. And Charles's son was placed on the throne. So there it is. Happy feast of St. Charles, King and Martyr. And we thank God today for the sacramental life of the church, the holy priesthood, and the preservation of the faith in England. Have a great Saturday.